I'm Trevor, and welcome to Catching Up on Cinema. If you aren't familiar with the program, Catching Up on Cinema is a film analysis podcast wherein we introduce each other to films, expand our cinematic horizons, and, in essence, catch up on our cinema. So, it is the month of December 2023, and we don't really have a theme in month for December of 2023. However, I am joined by a very special guest today to review a very special movie. So my guest today is somebody that I've collaborated with a few times in the past. And every time it's been a fucking blast. So hey, Richie from the Super Media Bros podcast. How's it going, bud?
It's going fantastic. I, like you, have my Super Devil Juice in my mug, and I am excited as shit to talk about this movie with you. I was not initially going to be able to review it, but when you were like, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to do this. Are you kidding me? I'm never going to miss out on talking about Godzilla, like, ever.
Oh, yeah. No, it's got to happen. I mean, I'm not sure, dear listeners, if you're familiar with my personal background with Godzilla, but historically, Godzilla episodes tend to run a little long because I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have attachments. But before we get into the movie proper, Richie, being as you've only been on the show once before, would you care to introduce your program, your podcast, Super Media Bros? Just let our listeners know what it is and what it's all about.
Yeah, so Super Media Bros podcast is a program where myself and my best friend Devin give a lot of comedically informative takes on movies, music, pro wrestling, and more. Where we've mostly been doing film reviews this year and a lot of wrestling pay-per-views / PLEs, as you will, because, fuck calling it pay-per-view anymore. It's been pay-per-view for 30-something years, but, premium live event. We do this week to week, and it's just been a lot of fun. We don't really do a lot of contemporary reviews, mostly because time scheduling and things like that. We tend to stick with classics or cult films that are less known, but that's kind of in our wheelhouse. We like to talk about movies that either deserve more spotlight or they're so bad they're good. You cannot help but, just be entertained by half the shit that you find. But we do it every week, so if you want to come hang out and join in our shenanigans, please go to supermediabrospodcast.com.
Yeah, by all means. It's a go-to for me. It's a weekly listen. It just so happens that you check virtually all of my personal boxes in terms of the content that you make. It's not often the same show from week to week. It's like, oh, it's FDR movie about about him fighting werewolves, is it? Yep. Or a wrestling event, and switching kind of just haphazardly back and forth between the two. It's like, yeah, either of these if you're going to roll those dice, it doesn't matter. It's all good to me. It's all sixes, man.
Right.
In my book. But yeah, thanks for that intro, Richie. But to intro the movie that we'll be talking about today, today we're going to be talking about a film that I believe is actually currently getting a somewhat wide domestic American theatrical release. I saw it via an early advanced screening, and Richie saw it just the other day. That would be Godzilla Minus One, which came out in 2023 in Japan only a couple of months ago in October. It's directed by Takashi Yamazaki. Now, Richie, going into this one, had you heard much buzz or hype before you got to the theater?
Honestly, I tried to go into this one as blind as possible. However, I don't know what it says about how the trailer was cut together or just the way they were rolling out this movie, period. But I knew it was going to be special. There was just something about it that I knew was going to be fucking special. I highly enjoyed Shin Godzilla when it came out, which I know we're not talking about that one, but the fact that it falls into the Reiwa era, which this one does as well. I love this era so far. So knowingly that I loved Shin Godzilla, I came into this one feeling like it was going to be a little more grand as far as the story, the action, Godzilla itself, and so on and so forth. And Jesus Christ, I was not disappointed, and it exceeded every expectation I had of it. And the one thing that I said as soon as he appears, holy fuck, Godzilla is frightening again. Like I was fucking terrified looking at it. And normally, like, and you can attest to this, and anybody out there that watches Godzilla can attest to this. 9 times out of 10 when we watch Godzilla, we want to see him wreck shit and we're rooting for Godzilla. However, in this movie, I was actually rooting for the humans to fucking kill him, which is unbelievable that you would get me, of all people, to do that. That's how powerful I thought the story in this was.
Yeah, I saw this movie with a friend of mine and my girlfriend, and I was telling her after the fact that aspect of it kind of made the movie almost like tailor-made for her. Like, this is very much a Godzilla film, but it has an emotionality and a human drama aspect of it that appeals to her more specifically, where it's like, for her, like, character and narrative is king. And this actually gave her something to latch onto, something that a lot of, like, not every Godzilla movie has. It's usually science man, reporter gal, or something like that in terms of your characters, whereas this one has a few more layers to it that really, really, really worked for her. And yeah, I agree with you. This one did exceed expectations in almost every category. But before we get into the movie proper, I think it would be kind of fun to set up our bona fides here.
Sure.
So we're going to be talking about the big G. Richie, I'd like to ask you, like, what is your, like, personal background with Godzilla, or maybe just like kaiju cinema in general?
Well, kaiju cinema, like, honestly, I was introduced to kaiju period because of Godzilla, but I didn't realize that kaiju was a terminology until obviously like later on, you know, as a teenager and then early adulthood. My first memory of Godzilla was, God, I think I was like 6 or 7 years old. I've mentioned this a million times over, so I'm so sorry for anybody that has followed me onto this show. My parents and family owned a video store for a number of years in our hometown, and we carried virtually everything. However, not there, but other video stores, like once ours closed, I started noticing Godzilla, like, on just boxes. And I think, like a lot of us, Godzilla 84/85 was, like, the one, because that was intended to be, like, a reintroduction of Godzilla, because Godzilla had been on a hiatus or a break for a number of years before that movie was produced. And at the time, it was a big deal when it had come out. I still love that movie very, very much. I'm very fond of that one. A lot of people are kind of like half and half with it, but I really enjoy it. However, seeing that, I went back and watched like Godzilla and King Ghidorah, and then fucking like the original Gojira from 1954. And that one still holds up for me, even though it's like old as shit and it's black and white. You know, you can't fuck with the original. I don't care what anybody says. But as far as the kaiju genre goes, it's weirdly like when you can classify kaiju as anything that's like giant, like a big fucking monster. When Cloverfield came out, that was another one that like made me be like, okay, I should really check out more shit. Rather than just Godzilla, King Kong, and, you know, things like that. So I started like diving further into it. And then you get into movies like Ultraman and, you know, things like that. And not even just the movies, but just the series in general. But Godzilla 84/85 was what got me into Godzilla first of all. And then just it was a gateway for everything else that followed. I'm very fond of this character.
And his 70 years of history.
I hope he makes it to 100.
Oh, he will. Absolutely. No, I mean, the tradition will be kept alive. And I've always said that, like, Godzilla he's the cultural barometer. He and James Bond. He's the Japanese James Bond is what I call him. Is Godzilla and James Bond will always be whatever the times demand them to be. So in 1954, Godzilla needed to be kind of a portent, like an ominous presence, that he was a force of evil and oblivion. And then, you know, years later, he turns into friend to all children.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then 30 years later, he's back to being, oh, it's that bastard again. It's like he's back.
Right.
Like whatever the vibe of the times are, just look to what that monster and what that man in that tux is up to. As for my personal background with Godzilla, I have a tricky task here. I have to be both thorough and succinct. Thorough because it's the internet, and succinct because I don't want this episode to be 3 hours long, I'll be honest. So, as for myself, the story goes, I was introduced to Godzilla when I was apparently a baby. There was a man in a Godzilla suit on the streets of San Francisco. And he was just like a mascot character or something. And apparently I went apeshit and was like squirming in my mother's arms or something.
So you went King Kong shit. See, this was the original Kong versus Godzilla happened when you were a baby.
You got to put that trailer theme music. I don't know if you remember this, Richie, but the marketing for Kong or Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla gets top billing, motherfucker.
Absolutely, yeah.
Kong may be older, but Godzilla's, excuse the expression, cultural footprint, I would say, is a little bit larger.
Yes,
at least today, anyway.
And his tail print.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The trailer music that they used for that is just somebody shouting "Here we go" with like an intense beat playing over it, and just goes. It sounds like A-Town Down.
Oh my God! Right.
Here we go. Give me the honey, never left the ledge. Here we go. We coming, you already know the rest. A-Town down. Scream it out loud. A-Town down. Future's right now.
They're the same. Identical.
I love good side-by-sides like that too.
Anyway, so yeah, I was introduced to him when I was a baby, apparently. When I was a little kid, son of Godzilla, Gojira no Musuko, that was like my go-to when I was a little kid. And we had a double feature bootleg VHS that I think my dad recorded off of like TBS or TNT or something. And the tape read, it was like hand labeled. It said Godzilla's best. And apparently I took that to heart because I still kind of feel this. And that tape included Terror of Mechagodzilla, Mechagojira no Gyakushu, from 1975, which was the last of the Showa era. I didn't know that at the time, obviously, because I was a little kid. And also Godzilla vs. Mothra, which was an earlier Godzilla from the early 60s. And both of them are very, very different, but they, to this day, are some of my very, very favorites. Anyway, I was kind of obsessed with Godzilla most of my life. I found ways to do like elementary school projects on him. Like the teachers tolerated that. I don't know how I got away with that shit. But in the late 90s, though, I went to a card shop, like a comic shop, with my grandma while my parents were shopping at like Costco or something. And my grandma wasn't in town all the time. She was from Hawaii, so she was visiting. And I saw on the wall a bootleg VHS of Godzilla vs. Destroya from 1995. Now, this was like 1996 or 7 or something. That film would not arrive officially on U.S. shores until 2001 maybe. Right.
And did they market that still as Heisei era, or did they try to like pass that as Millennium era? Because like I feel like it should stay Heisei because it was Japanese produced. Like,
I don't think they bothered to use any sort of terminology. It was just like, here's a DVD of a movie you hadn't heard of, because it received no marketing. It was, by the time it got here, it was like 5 or 6 years old. We completely missed, with the exception of 85 and Godzilla vs. Biollante, we did not get the Heisei era in the States, like contemporarily anyway. So I found this bootleg. And I convinced my grandma to buy it for me. It was horribly degraded. Everything was muddy and gray. It was English subtitled, though. And so every once in a while, like once a year or something, I would venture back to that comic shop, and they would get new bootlegs. So I kind of worked my way backwards through the Heisei era via these bootlegs. So I was kind of like ahead of the curve. And I kept up that trend. I found a bootlegger online that I would send money orders to. I'd have to convince my dad to get money orders to mail out to this rando from the internet who would English subtitle. He would buy the Japanese DVDs and subtitle them and region encode them 0. And so all through the 2000s, I was buying every subsequent Godzilla movie ahead of schedule by the US standard anyway. So I was like seeking out this stuff and gobbling it up as much as I could. And much like you, there was kind of a spidering out effect where it's like, you know, Godzilla's the gateway drug. He's the Mary Jane.
Right.
And then you move on to the harder stuff where it's like Shusuke Kaneko, his Gamera trilogy from the 90s. To me, that is perhaps bar none, like some of the best the genre has to offer.
Right, and especially, and I'm a sucker for stuff like this too, especially with the color grading of everything, because I think I mentioned this before we started rolling, like the Gamera like box sets that I bought.
Yeah,
I loved the restoration of that because it feels like a comic book, like it feels exactly like a comic book on screen, and I feel like a lot of the time that's what these characters are supposed to be. I mean, really. Granted, we have a lot of very realistic looking portrayals currently, you know, with the legendary Godzilla stuff, and then most recently with Minus One, how it looks hyper realistic in some ways, and it's frightening as shit. But you know, this was way back in the Man in Suit days, and those are just beloved to me. And because think about, you know, anybody out there listening, like think about the amount of work that goes into the planning for that shit, and then like being in the suit. You got to love your job, and you've got to love and have passion for this to be in a suit, especially if that suit weighs a fuckload, because holy shit, I couldn't imagine having to carry all that around and sweating my ass off to death, you know. But yeah, I'm fucking fond of just that aspect of it, how just bright and fantastic it looks. Even if the movies have like shit plots, I'm gonna watch all this stuff. It's such a popcorn thing for me.
Yeah, it like, not to get into too much about it, but a lot of it does. It's kind of interesting how the art form in and of itself carries so many characteristics to it that are very inherently Japanese, where it has kind of the transient aspect of it, where those suits are not built to last. Those models are absolutely intricately detailed and beautiful, but they're built to be obliterated in an instant on screen. So it's all this beauty, all this art generated very temporarily. But yeah, those suits, some of them, like the 84 suit was over 200 pounds. And one of the crazy things that you have to look up behind the scenes footage to really get a sense of what this is like. One of the crazier things about these movies is that they are filmed at a different frame rate. Mm-hmm. All the suitmation effects are. So the actual on-set action that plays out is going roughly twice as fast as what you see in the end product. So imagine wearing a 200-pound suit and having to like hustle your ass off. So like everything you're seeing on screen that was actually performed at twice that speed with twice the vigor.
That's insanity.
Yeah,
like,
and a lot of times
shit.
It's a little dude in the suit because that's the only people who could wear the damn thing. And yeah, almost everybody who's worn one of those suits has very nearly died inside of it. I mean, for fuck's sake, Haruo Nakajima was set on fire at least twice. And they kept it in the movie because, you know, that's what you do. It's like, that looked awesome, let's keep it in the movie. He almost died, not a big deal.
Right.
he was okay with it. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to.
I could go on forever, baby.
So let's talk about Godzilla Minus One. By talking about Godzilla Minus One as opposed to talking about like the details of the movie. So what I mean by that is just to create an outline of the people involved in the production. So I did mention the film is directed by Takashi Yamazaki. He is not a filmmaker that I have a whole lot of background with. However, I do know that he is a renowned filmmaker, and he does a lot of post-production special effects himself. As far as I understand, he probably has somewhat of a background in compositing or CGI effects, or in particular maybe animation, because I do know that he served as like a effects supervisor for this film and many other films that he's worked on. Just to point out some of the films on his filmography, one that I have seen, which is from very, very early in his filmography, is a Returner. From the year 2002. Richie, have you seen this one or heard of this one?
I've heard of it. I just haven't seen it. Which I wanted to like kind of hop onto your point about like the visual effects. Like seeing that he did directing and editing and visual effects for Godzilla Minus One. Like holy shit! Like that is such a task to take on. Like as one person. Like I granted he's got a team of people that's working with him, but if he's overseeing all this stuff, holy shit! Because the movie I was going to mention was Lupin III, the first, which obviously that's based or structured around the castle of Cagliostro, which I'm a big Miyazaki person, so that was cool to see. I think that come out like 2019 is when that one came out.
That's what I'm seeing. Yeah,
that was fun. So seeing that this dude has his hands on Godzilla, and especially with Reiwa having been involved with Neon Genesis, which is Evangelion, is like a great anime. Like I cannot stress enough how well that story is and how well done it is. So knowing it's in his hands, good shit, chef's kiss.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the film production, like directing culture is like in Japan, but I have to assume that there is like a little bit of a lead by example kind of quality to it, because I do know that I don't know if this is still true, but Hayao Miyazaki in the past I think has done key animation for his own films, and Hideaki Anno, I think that might be the same as well. It could be that that's kind of part of the process, is that if you are like a special effects intensive director, it's kind of expected that you'll lay hands on the actual effects work that's being put into the film. It won't just be simply handed off to a department or a department head. It's like you'll also walk into that department and lay hands on the product yourself. I think that was also the case with Shin Godzilla, where it was Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. It was a co-direction, and Higuchi in particular has an extensive background in special effects. So I believe both of them were heavily involved in it, at the very least the storyboarding of the effect shots.
Yeah, that's how Satoshi Kon was with his anime films too. He, even though he was directing, there was a lot of times I remember watching footage of him just hand drawing shit. I was like, he's still doing that. Like I applaud anybody that is willing to take on more work than what is tasked to them, just to make sure it's good. So,
well, also it's a matter of like the creative fingerprints that go onto the thing. It's like the person whose name is top billed, like there's something pleasant about knowing that they actually laid hands on the product and put their actual like literal stamp on it in some way. It's not required for sure. Like film is incredibly complex thing. Like you can certainly have a huge impact on it without touching every aspect of the production, but I don't know, there's something kind of special about that. But yeah, Returner is an early movie of his from 2002 that I have seen. I do like it quite a lot. He, I think, rose to prominence though through the Always Sunset on 3rd Street series of films, which apparently I haven't seen these films, but I have seen the Godzilla sequence. Godzilla is featured in the prologue or the opening sequence, I think, of the second film. It's a lovely bit of CGI animation, especially from that era, the 2000s. It was kind of a special novelty for Japanese cinema to have like a fully CGI Godzilla like realized in like semi-photorealistic quality. It hadn't really been done up until then. It was done very, very well. And also apparently he directed Godzilla the Ride. So this director has worked with Godzilla before in the past and apparently has an affinity for the character. But on top of that, he also has a couple of other films that seem to... It's actually kind of a really clean, direct path to this movie, if you think about it. Where it's like, one, he has a background in special... Well, yeah, 3 points, I guess. One, background in CGI effects. Two, has worked with Godzilla and Toho Studios before, because you gotta license that shit.
Yeah.
Toho doesn't just hand out Godzilla. You gotta beg.
You gotta earn that shit.
And three, he has done period piece films before, specifically from like the 1940s, 1950s era of Japanese modern history. And that comes in the form of The Eternal Zero, which is about a fighter pilot from World War II, and also The Great War of Archimedes, which also involves World War II. And the Sunset on 3rd Street films are also like 1950s era stories. Yes. So he has a nostalgia quality to him. He has like a retro vibe to him. He works with effects, and he's friendly with Toho. Kind of perfect storm, like in terms of getting this guy to the dance. In terms of other aspects of the production, I don't have a whole lot to say about the actors, other than the fact that our star is like a modern like national treasure. He is absolutely beloved despite his young age. It's Ryunosuke Kamiki, who plays Shikishima, who's our protagonist. And I have to ask you, Richie, have you seen the Rurouni Kenshin live-action films, the Kenshin films?
No, I have not. I want to, though. I want to.
Oh, you gotta, bud. Like get on. I don't often like give strong pushes for films. I would push strong for those.
Okay.
I used to watch the anime when I was in high school. I had a friend who would get import tapes and subtitle them himself. He was bilingual, and he had like an Apple computer that he was running his VHS tapes through that computer and subtitling his own anime and bringing them to school. Cool guy. So he would bring tapes of Kenshin in the late 90s to the school and stuff. And great show. Apparently the author's kind of a dickbag, not a good person.
Oh no.
Yeah, it happens. But I've always maintained that the live action movies are actually perhaps the best representation of the story. That doesn't happen often, where like a second or third iteration of something ends up being its best version. I mean, I kind of think of Fast Five as maybe an example of that, where it's like, so you mean it took 5 movies to get it right? Okay. Oof. I mean, at least, as long as you figured it out at some point. In case of emergency, insert rock.
Seems to be the case, sadly, a lot of the time nowadays. Ugh.
Yeah, his agent must suck, because in terms of, despite his wealth, despite his fame, the projects that man picks are not good projects. In general. But yeah, the Kenshin movies I would strongly recommend, and the reason I bring them up is because one, they share a common composer with this film. And it was very apparent to my ears. I guessed before I confirmed. I was like, "Oh, I think I recognize that sound." And then I went home and I was like, "Oh yeah, good job, Trevor. Attaboy. Nobody cares except you, but attaboy." But the other point is that we have a couple of actors who were both in a lot of those Kenshin movies in the form of our star Kamiki and Munetaka Aoki. Who plays Sosaku Tachibana, who is the mechanic from the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
Who's very, very important to the plot. They were, Seta Sojiro and Sanosuke Sagara. The two of them are both in those Kenshin movies. And if memory serves, it felt like an Easter egg. When those two characters are on screen for the first time together, I think they say "long time no see,"
which is fucking hilarious. You know they did that shit on purpose. They had to. There's no way.
I think that's what that was, because it is relevant. Like, they are supposed to be familiar with each other, but it felt like a nod to the audience. Like, it's like, yeah, we were together not too long ago in a bunch of movies, and they're both very, very popular. But
we know our target audience here. We know what's up.
Yeah. But by the way, the composer's name is Naoki Sato. So, Richie, it is catching up on cinema. We're going to spoil whatever we feel like. So feel free to just say anything. Doesn't really matter. So, dear listener, in case spoilers are a factor for you, I guess just know that the movie did exceed both of our expectations, meaning we kind of liked it.
Yeah.
So there's your review if that's all you want. But from here on out, I guess we're just going to be spoiling whatever we feel like. So now I pose the question to you, Richie. What shall we talk about? To quote Tote from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
I don't have a nunchuck coat hanger to flare in front of you right now, but you know.
Well, first of all, I want to point out and talk about that I was, like, again, I went into this blind, so I didn't know where at in our history or what have you this was going to take place. So I was very pleased to find out that this takes place in the 40s, like during the end of World War II, which that made me think, okay, Godzilla Minus One, we're going back. This almost feels like, because I didn't read if they advertised it as such or not, but this absolutely feels like a retake or a reimagining of his origins, and my God, like the way it starts with Shikishima, who is a kamikaze pilot, landing his plane on an island, Odo Island, which is like a place where they repair planes, and you find out via some dialogue that he's not, necessarily, having issues with his plane. So there's some plot right there that's going to stay with our main character throughout the entirety of this movie. And it's honestly a really well done plot. Because, at that time, the Japanese pilots were ordered to do this shit. And not everybody had their own, free will to not do it. That was your duty during that era. And I like that they played into not everybody wanted to do that, and including this guy, which is such an emotional weight, throughout this film. And he lands on this island. The mechanics figure out that he's kind of feigning this, and he is sitting at the water, and he starts seeing a lot of dead fish just floating up, which at first I didn't catch what that was. I was like, what the hell is that shit? And then I really looked, I was like, oh, wow, that's not at all what I thought it was. But we get, not very long into this scene, we get Godzilla proper, but it's not Godzilla as you know him quite yet, which was both a surprise and also, okay, I see what they're doing here. Because he's not gargantuan. He's large, but he's not towering like we all know him as. He's very young, or is what I would like to describe as this is teenage Godzilla. This is hormonal rampage Godzilla coming onto this island, and somehow it's kind of known that people have they're treating him like a myth at this point, unless you've seen it with your own eyes. Because Shikishima's like, oh, I've heard about this. It's Gojira. This is I heard about this from another person on the mainland and all this other shit. And I'll be damned if when he pops up, I legit got chills both out of excitement and fear. I may have mentioned this. I don't know if we were recording when I did mention this, but this is the first time in years that Godzilla has frightened me in a horror aspect, and I feel like that has been missing from this character for so long. And oh boy, did they execute that greatly during this scene. Shit.
Yeah, they do a really good job of kind of putting you in the shoes of the observers, where there is score playing over the sequence, but it's not completely overbearing. And a lot of it, there's just an air of helplessness, of hopelessness that is present in the scene, where it's just I don't know how anyone's going to get out of this. And there's also that sense of awe too, where it's this doesn't make sense. This should not be. But yeah, the prelude to it is handled really, really well, where we're introduced to the character of Shikishima, and yeah, we learn that he is a kamikaze pilot, and he's claiming that his plane needs repairs when it doesn't actually need that. They do a really lovely thing setting up this storyline where during the landing sequence of his plane, they fixate on the explosive in the carriage of his plane, and the camera, it's showing the plane land, but the camera is squarely fixated on the explosive, and it's what is a bomb's purpose? To explode and cause harm. And it did not do that. And that's kind of setting up the arc for the character, where it's he was assigned a great purpose. He was given a task. He was given a destiny, and it was not fulfilled. And it kind of leaves a scar on him throughout the rest of his story. And as Richie had said, this was something that you were ordered to do. It was actually considered an honor, as far as I understand. Foreign captured parties, like captive Koreans and stuff, were actually disallowed from doing this, despite the Japanese having almost no regard for their lives, It was like, no, we have to do this. Like they're less than. We can't let them do this great thing of killing ourselves to do harm to the enemy for the glory of the Empire of Japan. So there is like this weight and responsibility that falls on the character, and they do. That's kind of what makes the movie really, really work, is that he is a character and his story is compelling, like all the way through. But yeah, it's kind of incredible how quickly we get Godzilla in the film, where it's like it's very unexpected, and it comes hard and it comes fast, and it is kind of interesting because, as Richie had said, this is basically like a reboot. Like this is kind of doing the first film over again. And in fact, I had a story I was telling the girlfriend before we went to see the movie, like the night before, that I like wrote this story in a notebook when I was in high school. Like my idea was to remake the first movie from a civilian standpoint. So the same events would play out, but your frame would be that of the people on the ground who don't know what's going on. Everything they learn comes from news reports that are all falsified and stuff. And I even had the idea of having a pilot, a disgraced pilot, be the main character.
Right.
So I was like chuckling to myself in the theater. I was like, they made my damn movie. Those damn psychic Japanese producers, they mind robbed me.
It's time for you to go to Japanese Hollywood and get your motherfucking movie check, Trevor.
It's like, you made my... Oh, it's a secret window.
Yeah.
You stole my book. You stole my Godzilla.
Just come on, Silent Bob. We're going to Hollywood and get our fucking movie check. I did want to point out that the score, like you mentioned the score earlier, that is something that, and the sound effects too. Like you mentioned earlier, before we started recording, like about my son, like having seen it, because that dude is, he's about to be 16. He knows more about this character than I do. That's how obsessed he is with this character. He's really smart in general, but like when he loves something, he digs further. Like he was sitting there pointing, he's like, "Oh, this score is really intense," and he's like, "There's a couple of callbacks to the '50s one." He said they mixed the '54 roar in with whatever they're doing now, and I was like, "How the hell are you picking this out, dude?" Because as soon as he did it, he goes, "They made it sound younger, though." He's like, "That's the original one, but they made it sound like he's younger." I was like, "Oh my god, he's just like, picking it apart." I'm like, this kid here is fantastic, and it made me just love this even more. Looking over and seeing him, like he had his fist like, yes, like every time like, something would happen. I'm like, it's the same feeling I had watching him for the first time, and I'm watching it happen all over again. Even though it's not the first time, it's his first time seeing him in this horrific, scary manner, So good stuff. I had to throw that out there because that was just a proud dad moment.
Yeah, I was really hoping you would share that. So thanks for that. And also, it's like, he's not my kid, but I'm proud of him. Yeah, no, like the references in this movie are. It's kind of interesting because it's not like a hugely fan service oriented film, but there definitely are lots of direct references to that which came before. There's a lot of like honoring what came before that happens in this movie that's really interesting. But yeah, this first attack sequence is pretty intense. Like it's not crazy violent, but there is something particularly visceral of seeing just a human being disappear under the foot of a giant thing that is like ferocious, but at the same time, it's like it doesn't even have to be to get rid of a human being. It just by moving through an area, it causes so much chaos and mayhem. And it is really interesting how they the island that this sequence takes place on is Odo Island, as Richie had said, which in the '54 original movie is where he first appears. It's not the first time he's talked about or witnessed in some capacity in that movie, but it's where he makes landfall and we see him on screen for the first time. And there's like a whole sequence involving the village and the mythology behind the character in the original film, but here it's just kind of alluded to, and geographically it takes place in the same area. So it's like already kind of planting the seeds for like chronologically the story is earlier than the original Godzilla film, but we are going to be retracing some of the same steps in some capacity.
Right, which hence the -1 title, which I think is
Yeah.
fucking brilliant, actually.
Yeah, it has a dual meaning as far as I understand.
Yep.
One is chronologically, this does take place earlier. I think the bulk of the story takes place in 47, whereas
Yes.
the original Gojira is from 54. But also it's supposed to be, I think, an allusion to the state of Japanese society and how they were bombed back to the Stone Age, essentially, during the events of World War II. So it's like they were knocked down a peg and hence -1 from where they were, kind
Yes.
of. Which, interesting story. Actually, like, I'll just say this, like, right here, just because it's not actually relevant, but it is something that I carried into the film. I had some concerns about the politics of the movie going in, because I do know that there is like a lot of parts of the world, there is kind of a conservative swell going on in Japan contemporarily. And there's always been kind of a concern of Japan only has a self-defense force. They unconditionally surrendered at the conclusion of World War II, and they have a, quote, military, but basically it's only able to be activated for self-defense purposes. Basically, they have to be hit first in order for them to launch their military.
Right.
With the blessing of the UN and the US and stuff. And the concern has always been, it's like when they had a military, things didn't go so good for them and the rest of the world. And a lot of their neighbors are not especially keen on Japan having a military. And so I'll be honest and say I came into the movie a little bit concerned that it would come across as kind of saber rattly. Remember, this is before I saw the movie.
Right.
I was kind of concerned they would be like a rah go Japan, go military kind of movie. And there is that, but it's more of just like a strictly like a pride thing. Just like in a broad sense.
Yeah.
So it isn't politically inflammatory as far as I got, but I'll be honest and say that I did walk into the movie fearing that could be the case.
I did and I didn't. I'm glad that we got what we got, though. I thought that was extremely realistic. Like most, films that deal in war, they're realistic, for the most part, but the humanity aspect, like the realistic aspect is that of like the action and what happens. To see the humanity side of it as grounded as this was quite refreshing, especially given U.S. and Japanese history during this era.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about that, because to me, like I said, that was what made this movie really kind of special for the girlfriend. Like, this is what made this greater than just a big monster movie.
Yeah,
was the humanity aspect of it.
Oh, I cried several times during this film.
She did too. I had a good laugh because my buddy, I overheard him say "coward." My nickname for him is Cowboy, because he has kind of that like, yep, about time to hit that old dusty trail kind of energy to him. Like it's like he could. He's Blaine from Predator, where it's like he gets a bullet in the arm. He's like, I ain't got time to bleed.
You ain't got time to bleed.
So the girlfriend's crying next to him, and I just hear "coward."
My eyes ain't got time to bleed.
Yeah, the tear starts to come out and just goes gets sucked back into his head.
Gator don't play no shit.
Oh shit! But yeah, the human aspect of this movie was really profound, and it's kind of incredible actually that it's like fertile ground for storytelling, but it's actually, as far as I understand, not like especially well trodden ground for Godzilla films, because something that really hit me watching this movie was something that I think maybe wasn't as welcome in 1954. And that is the gut punch of a big giant monster arriving on the shores of your homeland 9 years after it was burned down via World War II. Like, and I'm talking like the civilian population, like all the cities were leveled via civilian bombings,
right,
and stuff. So the whole country gets leveled. They lose the war. 9 years later, it's rebuilt faster than like any country in the history of the world, and then it gets smashed again. It's
Right.
like the emotional gut punch of that is just so cruel and unfair. And they don't like, they certainly talk about it in 54, but they don't like dwell on it too much because it was probably still a little too fresh, where it's like we don't want to like put the magnifying glass too heavily on this, whereas this movie really emphasizes that aspect of it, where it's
Right.
like we get the story on Japanese soil at the very end of the war, so 1945, and then we get this like really beautiful little montage bringing us 2 years down the line, where it's like, wow, they came a long way in 2 years. They did a lot, and a lot of lives were lived, and there was a lot of happiness and prosperity and hardship for sure. And then this big bastard shows up and just stomps on it, and in seconds it's all gone again.
Yeah.
They really, really like hammer that point home, just how cruel and awful that is.
Yeah, and God, just seeing, especially how they showed Koichi building from nothing to get like the house that he had, like working these jobs. How, Sosaku was nervous about, him taking such a dangerous job, because the job that he takes is to collect all the sea mines, like the land mines they put in the ocean, is to collect them and blow them up, like with a ragtag, like shitty boat, which I do have something to say about, like how the movie was done in that aspect. So I won't forget it later, so I'll say it now.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they were able to make Godzilla, but like Jaws,
Yeah.
was fucking cool as shit. And
Yeah.
that's another thing my kid pointed out, because he loves Jaws. He loves Steven Spielberg films. So he goes, this is like Jaws, but with Godzilla. I said, exactly. It's frightening seeing this big son of a bitch in an ocean that could swallow anything, and it still swallows him. And he's just eyes above the water like a fucking alligator, and a shark just coming at you. Oh, God. In the midst of all that, shit. But yeah, the human aspect of it absolutely is... it's such a pleasant surprise for this one, because like you mentioned earlier, Trevor, like the emotional aspect doesn't necessarily get touched on as well as it has here. At least in the stuff that I have watched, it hasn't been done to this extent or this well. And I'm not alone with, like, I finally like popped on and was reading some reviews earlier today, because I didn't want to read them before I saw it.
Same here.
This is overwhelmingly positive for a Japanese Godzilla release, and it has probably been one of the best critically reviewed Godzilla films probably in the last 30 years, really, if you think about it. It's fantastic. I walked out of this, no bullshit, going like, I hope these actors get some type of awards for this shit, because it was so well done.
Oh yeah, this movie will win awards. Shin Godzilla won like the Japanese equivalent to an Academy Award, like Best Picture.
Good.
Like it deservedly so. Like
Absolutely.
It's a very complex, very layered movie that has a lot of social commentary. This one also echoes a lot of it as well. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with bureaucracy in both of these movies.
And I'll be honest, that's another thing I did want to bring up. I appreciate the fact that they didn't do some bullshit revisionist history with this.
Yeah, on that topic, I apologize if I'm just like cascading tidal wave of just blah, but I did have a lot of thoughts watching this movie. And I'll just start with the characters and I guess move into the politics. So after the attack on Odo Island, there are only two survivors. There's Shikishima and Sosaku. So we have kamikaze pilot who is still alive, and then a mechanic who was servicing his plane, who there's a fun little aside there where we learn that some of the crew on the airplane are with him in kind of turning their back to the war effort. But the mechanic was not at the time.
No.
Like he was kind of all in. He was like, you have a duty. I know that you're lying to me. You're supposed to go die for me and my boys.
Right.
My boys.
Not to cut you off real quick, but I did confuse Sasaku and Noriko like a dumbass. So feel free to leave this in. that I am a dumbass from time to time. I am a dumbass from time to time. I am a dumbass. I am a dumbass. Dumbass.
I'm gonna put it on repeat 6 times. I am a dumbass. I am a dumbass. I am a dumbass. Dumbass. Ass. Titties.
Techno
ass,
remix.
titties.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I'm saying there is that there was a split. Like there was some dissidence in terms of backing the war effort. And remember, this is 1945, and a big thing that this is like I said, this is full spoilers, but just to lay it out there, a big theme with the character Shikishima, to me anyway, was, I mean, survivor's guilt is the obvious, like, blanket terminology you could use to describe this character.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what he's about. That's what he symbolizes, is the burden of that. But on top of that, I think it's also about, like, the meaning of somebody's life and coming to embrace the weight and the meaning of your existence. Because as a kamikaze pilot, as doing a tokko, like all-out assault, giving your life for the war effort, for the glory of the empire, or the emperor, his purpose was to do that, was to die for his country, and maybe take a few enemy soldiers with him, or maybe a vessel or something. That was his purpose. And he firmly believes that that's what was supposed to happen. That would have been the best for everybody. But it's only through interactions with other human characters later on through the movie that he discovers, you know, I have worth to me. Like me still being here counts for something. I saved a child's life. I saved a young woman's life. We had a good life together. And then by the end of the movie, like by the time you get to the conclusion and we find out what happens to the monster and stuff, it's like it's 100% confirmed. You had to be here. Like, if you weren't here, shit wouldn't have worked out. Chief Brody had to be on that boat. Like, as good a fisherman as Quint was, as tough a son of as much of a sea cowboy as he was, he wasn't the guy who killed the shark. It was Chief Brody who killed the shark. He did fuck else up until then,
right.
But he got rid of the shark. And that's kind of the same arc with him, where it's like you were the guy who had to be there for all the pieces to fall in place. And I thought that was very, very satisfying. But like the way the story is set up, where it starts at the end of World War II, and then after he gets back home to Tokyo, it's just a wreck. It's just rubble. There's not a building standing. And there's a woman who apparently was a neighbor of his family, who, by the way, are all dead. They were all killed in fire bombings, civilian bombings of the Japanese like homeland. And she just comes at him. She gives him a tongue lashing. This lady starts out like terrifying, but then she ends up being a pretty cool person. She's really useful as like a representative of like the Japanese civilian population during the war.
Yeah.
What'd you think of this gal? Because like she comes out like just like bang bang, like she just like rips into him.
I was sitting there like, oh my god, like, damn, you know, it's like. That was, you said exactly what I was thinking. I was like, God damn, man! Like, tell me how you really feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the actress's name is Sumiko Ota. I don't know her, but she was very well cast in this. Like, she has the right energy and the right look for this particular role. Excuse me, that's the character's name. It's Sakura Ando is the actress's name. But yeah, she comes up to him and she just rips into him, tells him about how things have been shit here. Like, I don't know how it's been out on the ocean for you, but it's been shit out here.
You fucking son of a bitch.
Yeah, she's like, your parents are dead. You and your friends are dead.
You and your friends are dead!
I'm sitting here thinking, like, what is she? The end screen for the Friday the 13th NES game now? Like, what the fuck?
You and your friends are dead. Great reference. You're dead. You and your friends are dead.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. I mean, all you gotta do is steal that font and just add that to that screen.
Pretty much.
Do a ROM hack of it. But yeah, she comes at him, and remember, this is after he's survived the war. He just saw a bunch of people got killed by a fucking nuclear dinosaur.
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur. Bingo. Dino DNA.
He spared no expense fucking that all up, too. God damn.
On that topic, $15 million budget. Look what they did with $15 million. That's like a slasher movie budget out here.
Yep. It's gonna make more than that back, I guarantee. It already has, but it's gonna do big numbers.
Oh yeah, it made money domestically. It'll make money abroad for sure. But yeah, it's kind of incredible. Like, international film is always interesting to look at in that regard, because the American film industry just works on an altogether totally different scale. I love watching foreign films, and during the opening credits, they have 30 production logos. Because it's like, I got my dentist to pitch in $20, and so he gets a producer credit. So it's like you see like a Danish film or something. It's just like all these banners for, it's like Rooster Farms.
You got me thinking.
Farm.
Yeah, you got me thinking. I was like the dentist that pitched in. Maybe he didn't pitch the money in, because you know how they always they used to just say like Godzilla as himself or whatever. Like Godzilla got his own fucking credit. Like, maybe he was in charge of like cleaning Godzilla's teeth between takes of like chopping through shit. That's a task all in itself.
Oh yeah, you gotta polish them pearly whites. But yeah, she just comes at our protagonist, and some of the things that came to mind in terms of what she says to him is basically she's telling him, you had a job to do. Like, I know what your job was, and you being here tells me you didn't do it.
You had one
She's
job.
Like, yeah, you had one job and you fucked it up. But the deal is, like, what I got from this conversation is that politicians start wars and soldiers fight the wars, but that's never how it goes. Like soldiers are supposed to be like representatives. Like, if nations need to clash, you're supposed to have those people who go do the clashing, and then the rest of us are insulated from it, or at least that's how it should be. Or like, if it has to happen, that's ideally how I guess it would be. But look around you. It's like the entire country was bombed into oblivion before the nukes were dropped.
Yeah.
And basically she's just like hammering home this point that's like, I never asked for this. Like it wasn't me who said, let's go, to quote the band Manowar, fighting the world.
Right.
Nobody asked me to go fight the world. Like, you guys just went and did that, and you didn't even win. And look what came of it. And clearly she's not very happy about it. She lost her kids, but just to wrap up that character, she does end up having a lot of layers to her. She's horribly depressed and upset, obviously, because she lost her family, and then there's all these people that she feels shouldn't have lived who did live. But then when she discovers that there is rebuilding happening, when she sees that there's a future generation that still needs her, she does an about face. Like, she does a whole 180, and she's kind of like, she's in it. She's part of the family. As gruff as she can be, it's like, no, we all need to be in this together. She ends up being a really interesting character all the way through. But in terms of the politics, like, I got a lot of interesting symbolism out of this movie, where it's like, to me, it felt kind of like an apology of sorts, where it is a domestic Japanese production, and that's to its benefit, because the material that's covering, it's not a Marvel movie. It's not aiming for the entire world. I feel like a lot of the storytelling is, while it's approachable, it is focused squarely on the Japanese public and Japanese history and Japanese affairs. And a lot of it kind of felt like an apology for the Empire of Japan, like for that whole stretch of time, that whole experiment that just went so badly for everyone, including the Japanese by the time you get to the end of it. Because there's a whole sequence where they're planning an attack on Godzilla, where they're talking about like actual real life historical details about how bungled the whole operation was, about just how dispassionate it was towards, it was an effort for the glory of an organism that was larger than a human being, meaning the nation, the empire itself, rather than the actual human beings under the banner of it.
Right.
So they have this whole stretch where they're just talking about, we didn't have ejector seats in our planes. A lot of people died because of that. oh yeah, most of the deaths in the war weren't even from bullets or bombs. You just starved because we didn't know how to get food to you. And
Yeah.
it's like yeah, we fucked up. And a lot of the subtext is, in contemporary terms, very similar to Shin Godzilla. It's about bureaucracy and about how nationhood is a delicate, fragile thing that is very difficult to manage. And when it's managed poorly, people suffer. Like, lives are hurt because of it.
Right.
So a lot of the movie felt like kind of apologetic to like generations of families who aren't even necessarily alive to hear it anymore. It's just kind of acknowledgement of like, yeah, we can do better. Like, we should probably learn from that.
Exactly.
Where did you want to go with this, Richie? Because like, I definitely want to talk about Godzilla himself.
That's where I'm getting at too.
Okay, then take it off. Take it.
So by the time that Koichi and Noriko meet, and they develop a life together, and like I mentioned earlier, he took the job and started saving up and building this home and shit. There's a small scene where, if you don't know to really like pay attention to it, you don't kind of catch this, where they're doing all the nuclear tests. I think it's like during the Crossroads operation that this is happening, and it's destroying all these warships, and he's getting mutated under the water from all the bombs and shit. And not only is he getting mutated, you see his skin shedding, and he's growing. And not only does he grow, during the minesweeping shit that is happening, like I mentioned earlier with his job, where they're collecting all the landmines from the ocean, they come across him, and they try to release a mine and blow him up, and he catches it in his mouth, and they have success with blowing the mine up, and you're thinking, what the fuck? Well, half his face and jaw is just blown to shit. Godzilla's is. But it regenerates like that. That is the moment that I looked at this and I was like, holy shit, we're going there with this Godzilla. Which it's always been kind of like spoken about, but as far as my knowledge of the character and have, what I've seen, this is the first time I've seen them actually kind of go into more like detail of like, that's how quickly it happens for him. And it I guess it plays into like the quote lizard quality of like how a lizard loses its tail, it'll just grow it back. Godzilla has half his fucking face blown off, but it grew right back. And I was like, well, that ain't his tail, but shit. And not only did it grow back, it pissed him off real bad. Like the look in like that's what I mean about him being terrifying. There's a shot in this movie right towards the end where it's almost a freeze frame shot where he's about to like blast his fucking atomic breath, and he looks devilish at that point. Like it's just a face forward shot of him, mouth open. That beam is about to just, which by the way, that atomic breath effect in this movie, to me, no pun intended, but full pun intended, blows the other shit away completely, because it's like you hear like the sound just escape. There's nothing happening. It shoots out. Like dead silence, and then the explosions in which it creates looks like the atomic bomb explosion every time, and it's goddamn terrifying. And to have that chasing you in the water like that, oh hell no. Hell fucking no. And of course while this is happening, Koichi is shitting himself because he's like, well, I thought I was past this. It's time for me to live again. Oh, no, it's not. This fucker is back, and he's bigger, and he's even more pissed off. So, like, that's kind of how we get introduced to bigger Godzilla, which, I mean, he's not, like, legendary pictures big in this one, but he's big. Like, that's another thing my kid pointed out. He said it was like an amalgamation of the bottom half of Godzilla in this movie looked like the legendary, but the top half, like the head portion, almost represented, like the body and head portion was a little bit of like 85 and then like 54 all congealed together with a little bit of Millennium thrown in there. And I was like, dude, that's pretty fucking spot on. He looked like an amalgamation of a lot of great iterations of the character, but much more terrifying. And I do want to point out, a cool little detail they did where whenever he was powering up, with the atomic breath, how like the parts of his tail, like fins or spikes, were protruding out of him, like as he was charging. Which I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like everything about this was well done, but the initial attack on that little boat, dude, I was like, they're fucked. I was like, they're so fucked. If he gets them, they're screwed.
Yeah, you covered a lot of ground just then, so I'm going to try to catch up.
It's okay.
But yeah, our main character, Shikishima, he does have several episodes where he's like, episodes I think is the right word, where basically he's grappling with reality, where he's trying to convince himself that, like, no, all this happiness that I'm being surrounded with right now, all these pleasantries, all these kind people, they can't be real. I died on that beach. I got stepped on by that dinosaur just like everybody else.
Yeah, he's having severe PTSD moments, man. It's bad.
Yeah, and they make that a continual thread throughout the movie. It's not overbearing, like it doesn't occupy too much of the screen time, but it really does. It feels true to life.
It's impactful when it does happen.
Oh yeah, no, like the especially large breakdown that he has, where Noriko has to kind of soothe him, is really well acted. It's very well performed.
That's one of the first times I shed a tear. I was like, that's painful. It's painful to watch.
Oh yeah, no, it takes like an otherwise pretty strong figure and just renders them absolutely pathetic and helpless. And it's like, yeah, under that amount of emotional turmoil, that's what we all look like. And there's this pattern of every time things seem okay. And speaking from experience, my dad is a Vietnam War veteran. Like, he's had some bad days. This is kind of what it's like. It's like there's always the expectation of like the other shoe is going to drop, just because in wartime that is oftentimes how it plays out, where it's like it's boring as sin, and then out of nowhere a friend is gone. And so like that's the rhythm of this guy's life post-war, is that like every time he's about to be happy, about to allow himself to be happy, a fucking nuclear dinosaur shows up and just ruins his day.
That's the Asylum Pictures version of this nuclear dinosaur.
Nuclear dinosaur -2.
Write it. Somebody write that.
But yeah, the way what Richie had explained, I hadn't picked up on the shedding skin thing to symbolize his growth, but that's perfect for him being reptilian. It's like rapidly shedding skin to, like grow sizes larger. That's what reptiles do. But yeah, we get to see the Bikini Atoll H-bomb test, which I think the way it's explained in the 1954 movie is that it's just broadly H-bomb testing is what awoke this ancient creature from the bottom of the ocean. So don't do that. Whereas this one directly points the finger and says it was specifically this bomb that emboldened and empowered an already existing creature, like a terrestrial being. And then we get this like Indiana Jones-esque sequence of narration with like map, like it's like animation playing out over like a map, and we get a lot of radio chatter from American U.S. Navy officers talking about, yeah, we did the nuclear bomb test, the H-bomb test, and then vessels are getting sunk by something in the ocean that is making a beeline for the shores for Japanese soil, and it is spelled out to us, the viewer, and the characters in the film, that it's gonna get there. Like, we can't stop it. Like, we have tried, kinda, but we can't stop it, and we're not gonna help you. So this shit's your problem now.
Yeah.
So they just straight up tell the Japanese government, like, I think they have like a message from General MacArthur saying, arm yourselves. Just get a gun.
Yeah, because what they said was, they were like, oh, it's gonna how do they word it? It would create even more tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, so we're not gonna help you guys. It's like,
yes.
Well, okay. It's like, fuck. Yeah, this has fuck all to do with the Soviet Union, but fuck you guys. That's exactly how I looked at it. I was like, that's so fucking just
there's a lot of ways you can interpret it. One is like, maybe there's a bit of shame where it's like, the might of the U.S. military couldn't do shit.
That's like, another thing too.
It's like, maybe if we bow out early, nobody will point the finger at us as being losers.
Right. This is a y'all's problem message that I was looking at, just like, oh, that's so screwed.
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah. Man, Jesus.
But yeah, this lowly fishing boat, this wooden fishing boat with a gun emplacement, is the first line of Japan's defense, and it is a show-stopping set piece sequence. We don't rip away, we don't pull away from it. We're just in it for 5 minutes, and it is gripping. This is where the soundtrack for the film really, really hit me, because Naoki Sato, as I said, is the composer for the film, and he makes liberal use of choirs in the film for some of the bigger sequences. Not this one specifically, but whenever Godzilla is doing major destruction, like taking out the cruiser or walking through Ginza or something, we have a choir backing it. That is something he does. That's very, very noticeable in the Kenshin scores. But this sequence has just this electronic drone playing over it. It is so intimidating and overbearing. And I think the track is actually called Confusion. Not the techno song from the opening of Blade. Although that is a recut that I should probably do.
That would be fucking great, actually.
Boo, 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 boo.
You just see his head.
Confusion.
Yeah. He's swimming to the beat of the music and shit.
Yeah, I think the track is called Confusion, and it works because all the characters, with the exception of Shikishima, are seeing this thing for the first time. Even he's kind of seeing it for the first time because it's 5 times as big as he last saw it.
Right.
And it's just them throwing everything they've got at it and running the fuck away. And yeah, it does feel a lot like Jaws. You may as well swap out the mines for the floating barrels.
Yeah.
It's a fucking fishing trip that starts out kind of fun. They are kind of chummy when they're out on the water. And then as soon as the goddamn shark shows up, it's like, oh, shit. I love that quote from Quint in Jaws where they see the shark and they're talking about how big it is. And he just pauses. He's like, oh, I better get to work.
Same applies here.
Yeah, it's like they see Godzilla pop up. And it's like, oh, that's a big nuclear lizard. It's like, oh, we better get to work.
Yeah,
do something.
And the thing about Koichi that's really it plays throughout the movie too is that he's not just a kamikaze pilot. He's a gunner as well. Yeah. So the fact that you see the nervousness on, he's got a quiver in his right hand, which is his, he's right-handed, but it's the quiver in his hand when he goes to mount the gun, to shoot at Godzilla. And that's something that kind of plays throughout the rest of the movie too, is you don't just hear him talk about how worried he is. His body language is more than telling, than probably any words ever could.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he's a very physical actor. He's a hugely famous actor in Japan. He's hardworking actor, does tons of stuff. But I mostly know him from the Kenshin movies, and he was extraordinarily well cast in that. Because the character he's playing in that is supposed to be the baby-faced assassin. But he also has a thing where he's chipper, he's cheery all the time. He has a big smile. But he has a huge emotional breakdown at the end of one of those movies where he does the same kind of trick here, where he's literally bashing his head against the wall because the world doesn't make sense to him for a few minutes. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the shaking hands thing, because we did not mention that his survivor's guilt is doubled by not only did he not perform his duty as a kamikaze pilot. When Godzilla first arrived on Odo Island, his plane was the largest weapon they had available to them, and he was asked by the mechanic to hop into the cockpit and use its machine guns to fight the monster, and he didn't do that. He was too afraid. It didn't work out, so he feels like, I could have made a difference then. I didn't, and Also, it's symbolic of his attachment to his own life, because by the time you get to the end of this movie, he seems resolute in once again recommitting himself to being a kamikaze pilot. But even he himself, sitting in the pilot's seat, his hand is shaking, and you can read that as him being like, yeah, I still kind of want to live. Like as much as I keep telling myself I'm going to give my life for a greater cause, this is my body's way of telling me that ain't true, man. Like you still want to hang around. Like you still have business here.
Right. And that is further exemplified by his I put in quotations relationship, because it's more of a situationship than anything with Noriko and Akiko, who is when he's on land, you know, after he's kind of tried to recollect a little bit, you know, before their relationship, he meets her because she's fleeing with this kid, and she hands off this child to him, and he's just kind of sitting there like, well, what the fuck do I do with this thing? You know? And he's going to like leave it at first, but he's like, I can't do that shit. So he grabs the baby, you know, and he's going to walk away, and she pops out of nowhere, and she's like, oh, hey. And he's like, where the fuck were you at? And she's like, well, you were hiding in plain sight. I couldn't just go out there. You know, it's like, okay. You know, she's being chased by people, obviously. But like they wind up living together, you know, as we mentioned earlier. But I think like I was mentioning, like it was further exemplified by that relationship, because she does try to convince him, you know, throughout, and so do the other people that are on the boat with him. They you know, visit. They've become basically like a family at this point, and you know, they're like, well, when are you gonna ask her out, or like, are you gonna marry? Because he's like, oh, she's not my wife, and they're like, excuse me, she's living here. There's a kid here. What the fuck, you know? None of them are related. It's a child that she found, and he, you know, rescued the both of them, and they live together. So hence the situationship. And it's more or less, you know, they're trying to convince him, all of them really are like, you know, you can live, you know, you can live a life, you know. And granted, it is difficult to overcome the trauma that he's experienced, but they are all, you know, saying it without saying it, like, we're here for you, and it is possible for you to live a fulfilling life and be somebody. You don't have to be haunted by your past, which is the story of his character in this whole movie, is him overcoming that and being something, you know, more. You know, he thought he was going to be something more, but, you know, it's been haunting him. It's a fucking excellent human story, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that dinner scene where they kind of playfully, it starts out playful, but his reaction is really outsized, where he really snaps back at them, kind of like a dickwad. She's not my girlfriend, gall.
Right? He Napoleon Dynamites the shit out of it.
I'll just introduce a couple of Japanese things here that really caught my ears. Was I told my girlfriend about this, and she struggles to understand it sometimes, but there's two phrases that kind of important. There's yaru shikanai and shikata ga nai, or shikata nai. Basically means there's nothing to be done. And my understanding of it is that Japan has had a turbulent history, a very long history. But on top of that, it's a environmentally volatile region. Like it's a volcanic island. Like they have tsunamis, they have earthquakes, they have flooding, they have all these natural disasters that just happen every once in a while. They've had gigantic major earthquakes, many of them in my lifetime, you know, like in my 36 years of life. And it's my understanding that's part of the Japanese character, that bad shit happens, and you can shake your fist at the heavens and be mad at God or whoever for causing the ground to rumble and knock buildings on your family. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to be done. It happened, and there is no one to blame. And like if there's like faulty building or something, I guess you can file an insurance claim or something. But if a tidal wave, for instance, takes your home from you or something, you can't. You can be mad at the ocean only so much. So I feel like it's just like one of those things that's embodied in the character.
Right. It's a what will happen thing.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like that phrase is uttered several times in this movie, many times. And I feel like it was just like a especially relevant mantra and way of thinking that was absolutely of the utmost importance post-war. where it's just like, again, the first time we see Japan in this movie, it is rubble. Like the entire cityscape is just nothing. It's completely demolished.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the attitude to come at that? It's like, well, you can be really upset about it. You can like cry your heart out. But at the end of the day, you got to wake up every morning and it's still going to be there. So many characters in this, it seems like that's kind of what carries them through to tomorrow. So it's like, we have this kid. I don't know whose parents they are. They're here now. It's like, well, you know, what is the thing to do? It's like, well, you know, there's nothing to be done but like just make a family. Just pick up the pieces and keep moving.
Yeah. And I thought it was a precious, actually, like no, like bullshit. I thought it was honestly a precious situation, really.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cute and compelling. How it's like these three strangers, including the kid. It's like they all need each other, even if they don't acknowledge it.
Right. Especially him, because I think somewhere deep she does, obviously, and obviously the kid does, like that. She calls him mom and dad, you know, which another thing, he looks at this child who I don't think could have been more than 3, 4, 5 at this point. It's like, how many times he kind of gives him, hey, how many times I got to tell you, I ain't your daddy, kid. You know, it's the kind of moment. It's like, fuck, dude, really? Got to fucking like stogie out there. Yeah, I'm not your fucking kid. Man, fucking like smash.
It's like, your dad went out for cigarettes. And he ain't coming back.
He never came back. Your daddy was lactose intolerant. He found that lactate milk. Milk so good your father never came back.
Shit.
Yeah. Sorry.
Shit.
Fuck.
Important character worth mentioning. I mean, the fishing boat crew is just great. Very reminiscent of Jaws. We have the captain, the kid, and the doc.
Yes.
Long story short, the captain he's kind of the cheerleader for everybody. He's the, I don't know, he's the megaphone, basically. He says everything that everybody's thinking. And he has a couple of really important confrontations with Koichi, especially towards the end of the film. The kid is kind of representative of the next generation, where by the time they get to the conclusion, there's kind of a suicide mission vibe in the air, and they actually disallow him from participating because, again, the core idea here is that World War II and a lot of Japanese warfare history had kind of a culture of death, where there's honor in death. Like there's a good death that one can have as a professional fighter, like a professional soldier. And this movie firmly rejects that, where it's like, that's all bullshit. Like, that is not a way to live because that ends in death. And your eternal reward, I'm sorry, is not guaranteed. So this movie kind of rejects that in favor of, if we must fight, let us fight for the hope of tomorrow. Let's fight so we can secure the future. And the kid is that future, where it's like, we don't want you to fight because somebody's got to pick up the pieces tomorrow. And if we don't make it, it's got to be you. And then the doc is maybe the most important character, where he's completely wrapped up in the plot to almost like a ludicrous degree, but it works anyway. Where it's like, I thought you were a fisherman. like,
right.
What the fuck?
Like, where did this come from? Like,
you mean you did that like last night?
Right.
You came up with that last night?
He's like, I just had a couple ideas I jotted down. You know, nothing too crazy. And it's like, dude.
Yeah, I threw back some super devil juice.
That's
it. It just came out in the pen, you know.
Superzilla juice.
Market that.
That's it.
Slap that on a lunchbox.
It's a new energy drink.
But yeah, the doc like starts out. Apparently, his background was he was in like weapons technology development for the war effort. But now that the war's over, he works on a fishing boat blowing up decommissioned mines. But he ends up being involved in the ultimate plan to fight Godzilla after he makes landfall. But I guess we can get to him later. But yeah, Godzilla is first seen in that like in his main form at sea with the mines and stuff. And Richie already kind of talked about the design of Godzilla, but the design that came to my mind in terms of what it was most evocative of was the 1989 design, Godzilla versus Biollante, where he has multiple rows. He has like cornrows of spines on his head, and like he has almost like a somewhat dog-like snout. And there's so many design elements of this iteration of the character that I find really, really interesting. I'm not sure how much I love it, but there's some interesting design philosophy going on here. Because his arms are weirdly like atrophied. He has Kurt Angle arms. If you get the I knew you'd get that one, Richie.
Well, he turned into Perk Angle towards the end of the movie. I mean, fuck.
What I'm saying there is that when you suffer a severe spinal injury and get a subsequent fusion, there is atrophy in your arms that occurs sometimes. Mm-hmm. And if you look at more recent photos of Kurt Angle, or Bas Rutten for that matter, you'll know what I mean. Anyway, this Godzilla has kind of, not spindly arms, but like smaller arms than you'd expect, which has probably been the case in most Godzilla designs. But the fact of the matter is that the way the suits worked, he usually has his arms just kind of down here at his side. Mm-hmm. Like there's not a whole lot of like shoulder action in Godzilla's movements, but you get to see that here. And it's like, ooh, he's all legs, man.
Oh, he's caked up, dude. He's caked up.
He's all quads and buns.
That's it. He does not skip leg day at all.
But yeah, he's got kind of like small arms, and then his gait, the way he walks, is weirdly reptilian. Like if you've ever seen how a chameleon reaches across a branch, they do kind of like a stutter thing.
Yeah.
But there's like a mechanical, like moving on a rail kind of quality to it. And the way his feet work it is just kind of like it's a little RoboCop-esque.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But you can almost interpret that as like leaning into the reptilian aspect of things. And to me, that's kind of exemplified by his eyes. Because Richie mentioned how the eyes are very intimidating on this Godzilla. But it's for a strange reason. Because if we roll it back to Shin Godzilla, that one, the design philosophy seemed to be that of almost like a fish. Where his pupils are facing outward almost like a deer. Like his eyes are oriented on the sides of his head like a deer or something. Mm-hmm. And they don't move. He has no eyelids like a lot of lizards. And he looks almost like googly-eyed. Like he looks like a fucking Muppet at times. Like he's weirdly haunting and intimidating, but there's no expression except for when he's injured. Here, he has predatory, like mammalian, like forward-facing eyes, like binocular vision.
Yeah.
And yet there's still like a glassiness to it that the way it comes to mind is like you described him swimming. I remember seeing like nature footage like from Discovery Channel or National Geographic or something of a tiger swimming across a river after prey. Mm. And the way the eyes are just like, a tiger's not mad at you when he's hunting you. It's like you're a helpless moving thing that he must stop from moving. And that's kind of how this Godzilla looks, where it's like there's not a whole lot of there's no emotion in it. And there's not even like malice. It's just like he's looking through you.
It's instinctual. It's very much animal instinct, like pure in just that. Like there's really no other way to put it. The way they made him, which obviously he's an animal creature or whatever, but the way that the design works is, we see Godzilla in a lot of other movies and we're like, oh, it's Godzilla. It's just this fun, big fucking building wrecker, or whatever. You see him here with the I don't know what you would really call them, but there's like scales and like a bunch of other shit. Just kind of, looks like Godzilla's just got some fucking acne. I'm just gonna say it. This poor bastard's got acne for days all over his body. But it's very sea creature. It's very reptilian. It's it's animalistic. It's primal. It's a very primal look for him. And like you said, he's looking straight through you. That's what's frightening. Is that there's no, obviously you don't reason with him. There's no reason. There's no there's no getting away from it. He's locked eyes. Like you're screwed. And that's kind of the idea. Like just seeing him. You're completely fucked. But going back to the way you're talking about how he was walking, that's another thing I noticed too. And I was like, okay, so it isn't just like the robotic nature of it. It kind of exemplifies his mass, like how that's a lot of leg to move, how heavy he is. Like, because when he takes a couple steps, there's a couple times where you see the ground, like concrete, like the roadways and shit. You see it cave in and like shoot upward, like he's caving the ground in as he's walking, and it's shooting upward, and he's just demolishing the ground that he walks on. Like, he's so massively heavy that the ground supporting all these buildings and structures still can't support him and his weight. He is fucking everything up. But I found that interesting too. Like the way he walked, like you said, how he's just kind of taking slow trodden steps and everything. That was a very interesting take.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the weight aspect of things, because it on one end, it makes me think of Shin Godzilla, where I think there's a line of dialogue where everybody's flummoxed by what the fuck this thing is, and somebody just throws out there, it's like, he just moves. It's like why is he here? What does he want? Because in like previous iterations of the character, it's like, he has a territory, or in 84, he's after nuclear radiation to feed or something. Or he saw a flock of birds if you get to the end of the movie.
Right.
He was distracted by shiny lights. But yeah, in Shin Godzilla, they're talking about how like there is no thought. There's no concept or meaning to it. He just moves. Like, we don't know what this thing is. But in this one, yeah, actually the weight could be part of it, because like if we're speaking in realistic terms, there's that square cube law or whatever, where something cannot possibly, like an organic thing cannot grow beyond a certain capacity, otherwise it'll collapse under the weight of its own being.
Right.
So it's like in Shin Godzilla, there was talk from a design philosophy of standpoint of he's supposed to be in pain. Like, he's a nuclear aberration. He should not be. His mutation is painful.
Yeah.
This one, like, maybe you could reason that, yeah, like, he grew well beyond his means, because we saw where he came from and we saw how quickly the mutation occurred. It's like, yeah, maybe his body is not meant to be on land. Like, maybe being in the ocean is very much his natural habitat. And also the weight plays a part into the finale of the movie. Like, that's actually a important part of how they figure out how to deal with him.
Yeah. I was kind of like parlaying that into play, so I was kind of like, hey, so because they do mention, I think the doc actually mentions, he's like, I can't remember exactly what the line was, so like forgive me for fucking it up. Anybody out there that's seen this and immediately came to listen to this, dumbass. I think the doc says something to the effect of he weighs 25,000 tons. I think that's the number. It's
a crazy number that he says. Yeah, we can't pick that up. Like, can you lift that, bro?
Right, do you even lift, bro? It's like Muscle Man from fucking Regular Show. Do you even lift, bro?
So, I have a couple more points that I think are important to hit.
Sure.
And I suppose talking about a sequence is a good place to start. So, Ginza. So,
yes,
Godzilla makes landfall, and the timing of it is absolutely brutal from an emotional standpoint. This is where the girlfriend was bawling. This is where my friend's a coward.
Shit. Me too, though.
So the night before, Koichi has his biggest flashback, his biggest outburst yet, and Noriko, who the two of them, as you described it, are in a situationship. She does her best to convince him that he is still alive and he is safe. And everything is good. We are good. And it just so happens that she has gotten a job in Ginza, like in an actual rebuilt portion of Tokyo, because she's kind of like teasing that it's like, I'm planning to move out unless we figure out this situationship, kind of. Like, basically she's saying like, I want to contribute to the household more so than being a mother to this kid that we both have together. Right. Anyway, we know that she works there. And then we learn, oh, hey, Godzilla's made landfall in Ginza, where she works. So Koichi's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, dude. It's all shit. Fucking fails. God damn.
He hears it on the radio when he's playing with Akiko, the little kid, and he's just like, wait a second, that sounds familiar. Like, oh no.
He kind of had that moment, like they put in a lot of anime where there's nothing spoken, but then there's like sound happening where he's like, fucking out the door, like shit.
One of my favorite scene transitions that I don't know if this is inherently like a specifically Japanese thing, but it very much is when people sneeze, it means people are talking about. It means somebody's talking about you, Richie. It's Japanese. It's Japanese folklore tradition.
Oh wow!
And so that's one of my favorite scene transitions in Japanese media. Is somebody cut to somebody going "Achoo!" like right after somebody talks shit about them across the planet or whatever. That'd be funny. Just like every 2 minutes, cut back to Godzilla.
I was thinking the same fucking thing. His only line of dialogue, like they actually give Godzilla dialogue. Like, only time they'll ever do it in cinema history. He pops into Ginza. Heard you was talking shit about me. And that's all he says. That's all he fucking says. Heard you was talking shit.
The tanks lay into him. Chris Tucker. Which one of y'all hit me?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is I think one of the only times. There's only 2 instances where we see Godzilla on land in like on Japanese soil outside of Odo Island, and this is the main like quote rampage sequence. It's pretty brief, but very dramatic. We get to see a lot of fatalities. Like a lot of people get stepped on. A lot of people get rubble thrown on them.
Yeah.
And Noriko, the sequence, like the staging of it was. I was worried it was going to be really cheesy. It mostly works where she's in a subway car that gets picked up in his maw. And we get to see everybody slide out of that subway car to their doom. But she hangs on just long enough to fall into the water instead. But I was getting worried that it was going to get cheesy here. But I had an emotional conflict during this sequence, Richie.
Okay.
Maybe you or your kid, maybe you and your son would understand where this is coming from. So I did say that the composer of this film is Naoki Sato, and about 80% of the score is original composition, and very well done composition. But the other 20% is Akira Ifukube's original Godzilla themes, like a lot of his original compositions from the original Godzilla film, and especially King Kong versus Godzilla, which, if memory serves, I do remember hearing that was like a personal favorite score of his. From 1962. Anyway, the piece of music that plays when Godzilla is in Ginza is from... It's either King Kong versus Godzilla or the Godzilla versus Mothra rendition of the same piece of music. And I had an emotional conflict here, and I could tell that some people in the audience were perhaps having the same one. Because you see this in every Godzilla movie you attend, where you want to have the pop moment, where it's like, oh shit, it's Adam Copeland. Oh shit, it's Godzilla. It happened.
It's Edgezilla.
It's Edgezilla. It's Punkzilla. You want to have that pop moment because you're here for a Godzilla movie and you're a Godzilla fan. And there were Godzilla fans at my audience.
Same.
But at the same time, not here.
Right.
Like not in this movie.
Yeah, the scene you're talking about, absolutely, like the brum, 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 like that, the Godzilla like theme that everybody knows. I did have some conflict there too, because at first when I heard it, I was like, oh hell yeah, then I was like, wait, no. It was just like it was literally like that split second. I was like, "Oh fuck yeah! Wait a minute!"
Yeah, he's here to do bad things to people I like.
Right? Because normally, hearing that theme, I'm like, "Oh hell yeah! Tear some shit up! God damn it!" And this time, I was like, "The fuck are you doing, man? Don't do that shit!" It wasn't me telling the directors or whatever to not use the score, but I'm like, Godzilla, like, no, dude, no, this is your babyface theme. Like, what the fuck are you thinking, man? The other theme that they brought back to use, I actually liked where it was placed.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like being as you brought it up. So what Richie is alluding to here is the finale of the movie, which we've been talking around it, but we have this super huge civilian operation to attack Godzilla, because this movie realistically depicts Japan's position in global politics in 1947, they did not have a military. They are awarded, like they're gifted, decommissioned naval vessels to attempt to fight Godzilla with by the U.S. military. But other than that, they don't really have much to fight with. So it comes down to the population of the nation itself to organize and figure this shit out. So we have this super effort to sink and then raise Godzilla in sequence, where they're going to use Freon gas tanks to submerge him to the bottom of the ocean and try to crush him with the rapid pressurization, and then raise him, if that doesn't do it, to decompress him rapidly and make him pop like a goddamn balloon. So that's a 2-stage plan. Oh yeah, and there's a secret 3rd stage plan as well. But
Yes.
during this operation, very similar to Shin Godzilla with the trains, the delightful trains. Japanese and their trains, they love trains.
Right.
They also used a lot of older Godzilla pieces of music from that one, including one of my very favorite tracks from Terror of Mechagodzilla. It's like one of my favorite renditions of the Godzilla March. But they play the Godzilla March over this sequence, over this naval attack sequence where they're carrying out this operation against Godzilla. And what's really fascinating about the usage of the music is that it's the Godzilla theme.
Yes.
It's 70 years old. It is the first piece of music you have heard in Godzilla history. It plays over the opening credits along with Godzilla's roars of the original 54 film. But what's fascinating about the piece of music is that it has become his theme. It's definitely the theme of the 54 movie, but the way it's used in the body of the film is largely to accompany Japanese military movements in that film. It's not so much the theme of the monster causing chaos and mayhem, it's more the theme of the people fighting the monster.
Right.
And here they kind of restore it to that, where it is not so much the theme of Godzilla, it's more the theme of the people combating him, like the Japanese people combating him in the sequence.
Correct.
And on top of that, it's also a extended version of it that incorporates some music from King Kong versus Godzilla. If you want to hear the full version of it that's pulled from, they use it as the end credits for Godzilla versus Destroyer. It's one of the best arrangements of the Godzilla theme, if you ask me.
Yeah, a lot of great composers have worked on this character's films for as long as he's been around. And
even in the American ones, actually.
Dude, I gotta be honest. I love the American Godzilla films that have been coming out through Legendary. I really do. They're fantastic. I don't give a shit what anybody says. They're fucking great. But
I like them too.
Yeah, and I figured. Yeah, and I've heard your I've heard your opinions on them, and I was like, fucking, somebody has a brain around this son bitch. So, not to get off track too much, but speaking into how Godzilla was frightening in this film, Minus One. I felt the same about King Ghidorah in Godzilla King of the Monsters. I thought they finally made Ghidorah look fucking terrifying and just unbelievably overpowering, and it was great. But with this whole sequence here, I guess to tie in the Ginza attack and also the attack on Godzilla proper, towards the end of the film, Koichi is saved by Noriko when Zilla does his heat ray again, which decimates this city, along with him stomping and tail whipping the shit out of it, stepping on people and everything. The blast from the wave was coming towards him, and they're standing between a couple of buildings, and she shoves him forcefully into an alleyway, and she takes the brunt of the heat blast, and her and everything else around her just gone, completely gone. And to our knowledge and to Koichi's knowledge, she perished. And this is they felt like a wake for her, for lack of a better term. They felt a wake for her. The kid, Akiko, senses that she's gone, cries about it. You see I think it's up into this moment where Koichi finally kind of has that realization, this was my family. I didn't have family when I came back. I didn't know what my purpose was. Now I know what my purpose was supposed to be, and I've kind of fucked that up too. So Koichi now is headstrong about wanting to kill this monster, and even to the point where the doc is presenting all of these plans with the sinking and the submerging of him to freeze him, or doing a combustion thing. You know, he's asking the whole time, he's like, will this work? Will it kill him? And at first the doc's like, I can't guarantee that. And so Koichi gets up to leave, and he's like, no, it's going to work. It'll work. It's like, we need you, because he's the gunner. He's the guy that's going to be flying the plane to distract him while these boats are trying to carry out this mission in the ocean. So, you know, I know, Trevor, you probably have like a lot more to say about that sequence. I thought it was, in terms of script writing and how they were going to do it, I was like, oh, that makes sense for the time. And on paper, it looked like, in the movie now, on paper it looks good, but in practice, oh man, there's a couple things they didn't take into account with putting these buoys on him, or these floaty devices, which is fucking hilarious to consider Godzilla with floaties. So,
yeah, he's got water wings.
yeah,
He's got a fun noodle wrapped around him.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really neat that they found a way to have something on the level of the complexity of the plan enacted in Shin Godzilla, but with 1940s technology and equipment. I really liked the idea of the civilian task force kind of being assigned to do this. It's very much in the spirit of this film and Shin Godzilla, where it's like the Japanese public. Like, we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, but it cannot be emphasized enough how much this movie carries a air of dissatisfaction towards Japanese bureaucracy. How it's like it falls to us to take matters into our own hands to get shit done. Which kind of eerie vibes there a little bit, but it's also very hopeful and empowering to these people that we've seen go through so much, kind of take their fate into their own hands as best they can. But what's really cool about the plan is that I think it's Koichi who proposes the plane's involvement. And there's multiple thoughts running parallel to each other here, where it's like he desperately wants... He wants this lizard dead. He wants that nuclear lizard in the ground. He wants him buried. He wants him in a casket match at SummerSlam.
That's it.
Right now.
Yokozilla.
By God, Yokozilla with the salt.
Oh no. Bucket of salt. Yeah. Shit.
So yeah, the way I read it was that there's multiple thoughts running parallel, where he wants Godzilla dead, but he's also lost his own will to live, and he's kind of defaulted to, I'm a kamikaze pilot. I never should have been alive anyway. Every hope for happiness that I had just went away when Noriko saved me. Because you're right. He kind of recommitted himself to living like the day of her supposed demise. Put a pin in that. And I think it was he who proposed the plane, and I think a big part of that was the fact that as much as the doc was convinced that this was a good plan, he's a scientist and he can't guarantee that it's actually going to work. And Koichi he couldn't stomach that. He was like, I need to know that that us doing this will work, because if it doesn't and it's still alive, I can't die knowing that he's still alive. So I think I think it was his like ultimate kind of gesture to kind of be a level of insurance, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like he planted the seed in his own head where he's like, I think I know of a way to hurt the thing, even though we saw what happened. It's like he got better. Like it's like
right.
He got better. like his head got blowed up and he got better.
Yeah.
you sure about that, buddy?
The other thing that I think is running through his head is redemption. Like not
Yes.
just for or revenge also, but like redemption for himself, where he was like, this is where I failed last time, I won't fail again. Even though it was right of him to want to live and to want to continue his life and, you know, taking advice and finally listening and be like, oh, well, my life's good now. I guess, you know, I could live again. But at that point, like, let's all be real. Losing everything that you've rebuilt and worked so hard to get Like at that point, you're just kind of like, fuck this. And he had the fuck this moment. To the point that to get a plane, he wrote a shitload of angry letters to Sosaku, who you don't see for the majority of this film. He writes a shitload of angry letters to Sosaku so that he will find him, because he can't track Sosaku down. Sosaku's been in, underground or hiding, or just, out of sight for a number of years at this point. Which you kind of forget about that character until he finds him, and at first Sosaku's beating the piss out of him, and then Koichi's like, I had to write all these letters. I'm sorry. I needed you to find me because I couldn't find you. And, the plot thickens, if you will, from there.
Yeah. The reintegration of Sosaku was really key in making this movie really work for me. And comes down to really like the closing moments of it, honestly, because there's like an attaboy that happens in this movie at the very end that it's what the character needed, and it came from the one person that it could come from, because we've seen Noriko like reassuring him and trying to shoulder his burden as best that she can, and as much love and appreciation as they have for each other, she's not the right mouthpiece for that message.
Right.
Sosaku is the one guy on the planet who can say these words to him and have it carry the weight that it needs to.
Well, maybe I was right to call him the girlfriend earlier in the movie.
Yeah. See, Richie knows what he's talking about.
I am not a dumbass.
But yeah, he's brought back into the movie because we need a plane, and we need a mechanic to service the plane, and he's the one that Koichi knows, and resources are short. And on top of that, he's the only other person on the entire planet who shares the same exact trauma as him in terms of surviving the Odo Island incident. And on some level, probably feeling that perhaps we could have stopped this before it started. And also, Sosaku was the one who was the most cruel to him of anybody. He was like one of the people that was condemning him for failing to fight the monster. And also, we saw him give him all of the mementos and photos of all of his crew members, his friends, who were killed while they both survived. So he handed those off to Koichi just to kind of like weigh him down with the emotional burden that comes with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they both work together to restore a shinden. It's a plane that, the way it's described in the film, was designed for defending the Japanese homeland against an attack that never came, because instead the U.S. dropped nuclear bombs insteed of invading on the ground.
Right.
I know this plane from video games, like Raiden Fighters. The Raiden series of shoot 'em ups. It's featured in a lot of shmups, like Strikers 1945. I think it's also in there.
Oh wow,
cool design. It has a propeller in the rear, which looks really cool. Anyway, Koichi is the pilot, and so we have our three-pronged attack where we have the Navy, and later on we pull a Dunkirk, where all the local fishermen show up with tow cables to assist in hauling up Godzilla. But then the last aspect of the plan involves Koichi drawing Godzilla away from the land and out to sea, using the shinden, using the plane, using the jet. No, it's not a jet, it's a plane. And then the coup de grace comes in the form of him, because surprise, surprise, the pressurization doesn't do it. The decompression doesn't do it. It fucks him up royally. It fucks Godzilla up really bad. But he's still ready to launch his nuclear death breath.
Yeah, because that's the sequence right there that I was talking about earlier, where the look in his face, like, it is by and large the most evil that you see him look in this film, because he's freezing over, like, because that's an absurd temperature change, going from that deep. You see the ice forming over him and shit, and he's just like floating up to the top. And
I think his eyeballs were popping out of his
They were
too.
They were
like a fish.
That's what I'm saying. Like
he
was like he was fucked up.
Total Recall Godzilla.
Dude.
He got his ass to Mars.
He comes out of the water.
That's another recut I gotta do.
Total recut. There you go. So, but yeah, oh God, it is one of the best shots in the movie. Really, that whole piece of sequence is fantastic. Just fantastic. Like time stops, almost dead silence, no score, nothing, and the coup de grace that I believe Trevor is referring to is Koichi is gonna just fly the damn plane into this fucker with a bomb, and we get that shot of him looking at a picture of Noriko that was taken of her at a family dinner, a while back, and he pulls this lever that Sosaku had told him, like, hey, just pull this lever, it'll activate the bomb, get it ready. And it's all quiet until they pick up the shot of Godzilla about to like fire his heat ray, and then you see the plane just hit, and then I can't really describe the cinematography right here other than it looks like it's almost a Matrix, like when Neo jumps in the air or whatever, they jump in the air and they spin around or whatever the fuck, because it hits and then there's just like a wide pan shot and it kind of goes around him so you can see like what just happened, and then his head just blows the fuck up, like very violently. Like there's like viscera and all kinds of shit just like hanging off of him, and like I didn't catch this really until it started to happen, where I was like, why the hell is he falling apart? And then I realized that his throat got clogged with the fucking plane, so like all the energy he was about to expel just had nowhere to go. Yeah,
so like he effectively killed himself in some way.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very effective sequence, very reminiscent of Jaws with the oxygen tank, the air tank in the mouth. Smile, you son of a bitch,
yes.
In Japanese. Not sure how to say that one. I know some Japanese, but not that bit. Yeah, the big spoiler here is that Koichi does not die here. He was committed to just going along with the monster. Me and my friend both agreed that it was teased maybe a little too strongly, like the breadcrumbs were a little too chunky. It would have been nice to be like completely surprised by that revelation, but there is like a shot where we see Sosaku working on the plane, and there's just this shot of him looking into the seat, and we see text written in German that I can't read, but there's a weight, there's a meaning behind that shot's placement in the edit of the film, such that you can kind of infer that, oh, it's an ejector seat, being as we had that line earlier about how most Japanese aircraft at the time didn't have them. This one apparently did, or at least in the film it does. So yeah, he ejected under the advisement of Sosaku, who up until this point had been the one who was like, you should have died. You should have died a long time ago, during the war, in fact, before the monster even showed up. But here he tells him, no, you got a little girl you got to take care of. Like, you should eject and live. Like, that would be the good thing to do here.
That combined with the final shot of this movie is where I think I lost it emotionally the most, because it's the way the line is delivered. He's saying, here's the bomb, here's your guns. And then he just leans in. He's like, this is an ejection seat. You just pull this whenever you need to. And then he just puts his hand on his arm and says, live.
Yeah.
And that's all he says. And it is all the weight that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And goddamn, like what a sequence. And then to see him parachuting down when everybody else thought he had perished, and, especially like his adopted family, basically, like, you got this kid. You're like, what are you doing? Just to see the emotion written on everybody's face when he comes down, and the victory and everything else in between is just fantastic. And the movie comes to a conclusion where his neighbor, who watches Akiko a lot, who is kind of like she's kind of like the adoptive grandmother. So this child has like all kinds of fucking people in her life.
Yeah.
She's definitely not unloved for sure, which is fucking cool. But like, she comes up to Koichi and not saying it necessarily, but like, she has that "you son of a bitch" like look in his eyes. But she tells him that Noriko is alive. Some fucking how she's alive. And that's where I lost my shit, because like, he finally goes with Akiko to the hospital, opens the door and sees her all bandaged up and shit, and he just breaks down, because like, he, you know, like you said earlier, this is his purpose. This is why he was supposed to live. This is why he wasn't supposed to die in the war. But as she's leaning over and hugging and consoling him, you see like you see some black in her neck, in her veins, which implies that she has radiation poisoning or some type of radiation sickness from the blast.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to end an otherwise very hopeful and uplifting story. Like, it truly horrific throughout most of the film, but aside from its very closing moments, it kind of has an upward trajectory in terms of the tone. But yeah, I love the placement of that sequence between he and Sosaku, where it comes after he's ejected, after the plane has crashed. We get to fill in that blank a little bit later, and the impact of it is so much greater. But yeah, something we didn't talk about, just a small detail, but very worth mentioning, is when Godzilla blows up Ginza, when he breathes fire on the city and we get a mushroom cloud, the music that plays over that sequence is haunting and horrifying.
Dude.
And the visuals on top of that are very, very powerful. But the Koichi's reaction to the post explosion.
Oh my God, that broke my fucking heart, dude.
That's when the girlfriend was bawling. It was that shot where it's pulling back and he's just shrieking, and we get straight up black rain, like much like in the aftermath of the actual atomic bombs. You could argue that perhaps it's just ash, like it's just ash and rain or something, not actual nuclear black rain. But the audio-visual combination of him shrieking to the heavens and the black rain pouring on him after we've seen his emotional support in the form of Noriko get blown the fuck away is very powerful filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then to have her come back at the end, though, what's remarkable about that is that it isn't cheap. It so easily could have been super cheap and phony and like eye rolly, but they do actually kind of plant the seeds for it ever so slightly, where when we see the process that he has to go through to track down Sosaku, the mechanic from the war, he actually goes to an office to help locate him. And we see the office is just completely overrun. Like, there's people scrambling, there's papers everywhere.
Yep.
And if you look at any disaster, like let alone a world fucking war or something, that's what happens. When a tsunami rips through a town, people go missing. And this was the 1940s. There's nothing but paper records, if that. Most people probably aren't carrying ID on their person. After a city is blown the fuck up, they probably wouldn't know who she is or where she's from.
No.
Like, tracking down people in that kind of situation, I can't tell you how many generations of families were forever separated because of incidents like that. So it actually makes sense that she could have conceivably been blown away, covered in rubble, recovered days later, put in a hospital, and they didn't know who she was or who to contact.
Right.
And I thought it played pretty well. But yeah, the radiation poisoning thing seems to be like, this is a recurring element of Godzilla stories and a lot of modern Japanese history too, is that Godzilla symbolically is kind of like he's the forever terror. He's that thing that we aren't meant to be free of. Same goes for war or atomic weaponry as well. It is a forever scar on human history. So it's like, it's a cruel reminder that, you know, as hopeful as this outcome was today, inevitably there will be fallout, literally, and there will be problems down the road. It's a not a solvable problem, I guess, is what the movie's trying to say. Is
Right.
that these are messages that need, as painful as they are to carry, cannot go away.
Yeah. And speaking of not going away, the final shot of the movie is a giant chunk of Godzilla's flesh sinking to the ocean, and it starts to regenerate from like nothing, which is in and of itself fucking terrifying because it's just a piece of his flesh. You don't know what part it is, but it looks like his heart because there's like a little bit of a beat to it.
Yeah, question. Have you and your son seen, they call it GMK? It's from 2001. It's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All Out Monsters Attack is the English title.
Yes, he was actually talking about All Out Monsters Attack as we were leaving the theater from that.
There's some thematic connections in that the Godzilla in that movie is very explicitly supposed to be a revenant. Like he doesn't have pupils. Like he's a specter. That he's a revenant that's meant to be like an aggregate of all the trauma of World War II. Not necessarily like the anger, resentment of the soldiers who fought, but more like the civilians who were caught in the crossfire on all sides, not just the Japanese side of things.
Right.
And then on top of that, the conclusion of that movie is, spoiler alert, Godzilla's heart at the bottom of the ocean, just the heart starts pumping and the Godzilla theme starts playing. So it's a direct allusion to that movie. It's very, very cool in that regard. But on that subject, I'm kind of pissed that it took this long to get to this part of the conversation. I apologize, Richie. Not my finest hour in terms of organizing my thoughts, but symbolism. What, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, so if you want me to ramble for a while so you can think, feel free to say so. What would you say Godzilla represented in this movie? Like what did you, like, because I don't actually know of a clean explanation. I mean, I haven't researched this movie. I don't think there's research to be done. It's a pretty new movie, and I've only seen it once, but what thoughts ran through your head in terms of what the monster in this movie could stand for?
It's probably going to come out of left field, and maybe nobody has thought about it this way. And I mean, there's a lot of things, but one thing that stuck out to me, and this isn't even necessarily like on a society or people at large or politicians or any of that shit for him. Godzilla in this particular film, to me, represented a physical embodiment of Koichi's nightmares coming back to haunt him throughout the entirety of this film. Like from the experiences on Odo Island. That is how I looked at him. Because that's what made it a little more frightening also, is that the form that he took when he saw him again represented not just that specific moment, but the growth of how much it has overtaken his life. Because you think about the first time he sees Godzilla, he's not as big, but when he sees him again after the haunting of that incident, he's much larger and much more imposing and much more dangerous. That's how I saw him.
That's really beautiful, Richie. Like I think in the narrative of the film, I think that is the cleanest approach to take when conceiving of what the monster is all about in this one. And on top of that, like the size and the menace aspect of it, that's how a lot of that PTSD and survivor's guilt stuff works, is that it does flare up, it does intensify, it comes back with a fury at unexpected times. Just like I said, it's quiet, it's good for a while, and then the other shoe drops and he's got nuclear death breath. It's like,
right.
Oh shit, the dead man's back.
Yeah.
He's no longer the American badass.
No. he's bro tank top Undertaker.
Godzilla shows up, rest in peace.
He just was rest in piss. Because everybody will piss themselves when they see him.
Keep rolling.
What?
Godzilla keeps rolling.
He's fucking singing that song to himself as he's like slow stepping on the ground. Keep rolling.
I need to see Godzilla in a bandana.
Tails up, tails down.
I mean, Japanese filmmakers, like, Japan loves pro wrestling. Like, Godzilla has done wrestling moves in the past.
Yes.
I've seen him do body splashes. I've seen him do wrestling moves. How about a fucking last ride?
Exactly.
I mean, he does have scrawny arms. It'd be really hard to get him up, I guess. No, he needs to do a stink face with his build.
Oh my god, yes.
Or a Bronco Buster. Or
Oh,
something.
Jesus Christ, yes.
All right, so I'm going to throw a bunch of shit at you so we can tackle this in stages, but I'll try to keep it brief here. So I just jotted down some very scattered thoughts when it came to what the monster could be about in this. And for what it's worth, I am in full agreement with what Richie had said about the way I described it was, again, that terminology, a revenant. He is specifically a specter haunting Koichi. Like, he is his monster that can be projected onto the entirety of the film. Like, everybody, he's now everybody's problem, not just Koichi.
Is he by that terminology, is he kind of a version of a shonen bat at that point?
I mean, yeah, you could argue that.
That's a paranoia agent reference for anybody out there not paying attention to that line. That's a deep cut there, buddy.
Deep cut.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to rattle these off, the Godzilla in this film is perhaps symbolic of the very concept of war, or specifically World War II. But then, as I was running with that thread, it occurred to me, that's kind of flimsy. What's probably more accurate, and has traditionally been accurate for the character, is the atom bomb and just mass destruction as kind of a thing that only modern man has been able to achieve. Specifically the atom bomb, to date only visited upon the Japanese people. And the way I described it was, in this film, he arrives suddenly and hits not a military installation or a military attack force. He hits a population center, and he arrives mostly without warning. There is mention that the Japanese public are informed that there's something coming, but it's not really explicitly stated what. So it may as well be like blaring an air raid siren. And on top of that, he's demonstrated he can't be fought. You can't fight a bomb. It goes off and everybody's gone. He represents oblivion. It's like you can spin, especially in more ancient times. There's glory and honor to be had, especially in Japanese time, like Japanese culture, like in the history of Japan. Like, there's glory and honor to be found in fighting and in death. But that all goes out the window when 100,000 people can be blinked out of existence in an instant. So he represents oblivion. He represents, he's not waving a flag or anything. He is the end of everything, including himself, which is really fascinating. Because we do see him like singed a little bit after he breathes his fire, at least once or twice in this film.
Yeah.
So it does seem to like hurt himself in some regard. And in fact, it does seem to be the case that it's his own power that proves to be his undoing.
Yeah.
Again, oblivion. He's the end of everything, including himself. Because if you set off enough nukes, there's not going to be there aren't going to be people around to set them off any longer. But more of a kind of a out there idea that I had was kind of symbolic of a test of Japan's resolve, because there is a lot of mention of there's no international aid in a couple years post-war. Like, they're in a weakened state. They're not on their feet just yet. So he's kind of a test to their resolve, their ability to enter modernity, to kind of move past the imperial era of their history, where it's like you got one last hurdle to get over before you can move on to your next age. But then a really wild one that came to mind was, and excuse me for taking the material for a walk here, but I had fun with this. And actually had a lot of fun with this part, was symbolic of Japan itself. And the way I reasoned that was, he's an ancient creature. because he's present in the film. He's talked about in mythology, and he's before, as far as I can tell, it's before the atomic bombs were dropped in the film. Like, it's before the surrender of Japan during World War II. So he's this ancient creature that later in the film is awakened and emboldened. Specifically, they actually point out which bomb and by whom it was dropped. It's an American bomb dropped, an H-bomb. He is awakened and empowered by the H-bomb. And what I'm saying here is that Japan is a very old country, a very long history, much, much longer history than the United States. And history has shown that it was when Japan was empowered by Western, for lack of a better term, technology and trade, that, as my mom told me when I was a kid, they went apeshit. It's like they had a good thing going, and then we gave those guys guns, and they decided to start shooting everybody. They decided to, again, to quote Manowar, fight the world. So what I'm saying here is you have this ancient dinosaur that was just kind of doing its thing, and then modern technology and foreign power is injected into it, and it rages out of control. And a wild theory, I know, but I thought there was something to that.
Oh no, you're absolutely on the money with a lot of that shit, dude. Like that, and that's the thing about Godzilla that I think I love the most is you can pretty much attach anything to it.
Yeah, like I said, he's Japanese James Bond.
Yeah.
He is what we need him to be right now, and I feel like this was one of those. It's almost the 70th anniversary of the character next year. So it's one of those things. It is a recurring pattern in the narrative of Godzilla films and Japanese media in general. There is this need to kind of remind the newer generations that while this is a fictional story, there are elements of it that are true. Like Grave of the Fireflies you've seen that movie, Richie?
Oh my God, yes, that is an emotionally fucking like. I don't want to. I watch it every once in a while because I don't feel like being emotionally obliterated like every time.
Yeah, no, it's a horribly emotionally intense film, and it even ends, like, spoilers, with a fourth wall break in the form of the ghost of a character in it looking into your soul, as if to say, you know, your grandpa, he's kind of weird sometimes. This would be why, is because all of this was his reality at some point. And same goes for movies like this. It's a necessary reminder every few generations or so, or every generation maybe, that a lot of this did happen. A lot of this was true, even though it is a very fictional story with a nuclear fire-breathing lizard in it. But you see that in Godzilla movies over time. It's like 54, he's a monster. 60s, he's friend to all children. 1984, he's back to being that bastard again. And it's just a recurring pattern. It's like it's a necessary reminder that history did in fact happen. We can't sweep it under the rug.
No.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it is going to be 70 next year.
70.
Yeah.
70.
So what does that make it this year?
69.
69,
nice.
dudes.
Nice.
Yeah. How fucking fitting though, man. Like great Godzilla movie. Dare I say that this is top 3. This is easily top 3 for me. It's so good. My friend Devin, who I do my podcast with, I just looked on, like, my phone had a pop-up and he's like, hey dude, going to see -1. No spoilers, but how was it? And I was just like, just let the movie happen. And he just sent the salute emoji back, like, all right.
That's awesome.
He is fucking salivating for this movie. He's like, I haven't been this hyped for a movie since, like, the Nolan-verse, like, Batman films. Like, he's younger than I am, so, like, that was his, like, how Michael Keaton is for us, like, the Bale Batman shit was for him. So I'm excited for him to see this, and I'm gonna be like, hey, why don't you cheap plug, listen to me and Trevor talk about this fucker, like, later on. So
Devin, aka the fetus. The fetus.
Yes. Yes.
You guys have a great show, though. I love listening to you guys talk. But yeah, hopefully he enjoys the movie. Okay, well, Richie. Well, I think we've talked more than enough about Godzilla Minus One. So here comes the part of the show where I say, thanks a lot, man. This was tons of fun. Love having you on the show.
It was 25,000 tons of fun, Trevor.
All right. Well, before we go, would you care to let our listeners know where they can find you and your super awesome podcast that they definitely should be listening to?
If you want to come check out Super Media Bros, please visit supermediabrospodcast.com. All of our past, present, and future episodes are there, including links to our Apple and Spotify pages, YouTube, the whole nine. So we have an episode that's out every Saturday. And this month we dropped a bonus episode on the return of CM Punk to the WWE. So we weren't planning on doing that, but it just kind of happened, so we had to talk about it. But we've got a slew of other shit coming out this month, including, I don't know when this episode is going to drop, so either before or after. Trevor, you are going to be coming to hang out with me on my show to talk about Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 as part of our Cult Cinema Saturday series. So please, everybody, come check that out.
All right, well said. And also thank you for doing that Punk episode, because you saved me the trouble of having to look into things. You just gave me the scoop all in one shot.
That's what I do.
Yeah, no, I didn't know all the business about how quickly that all came together. Like, I wasn't aware of that, and I didn't know that TNA was talking to him either.
Yep. There was a lot of interest from their camp, because, I mean, he wrestled with them briefly before WWE. So, like I said, it's very fascinating, actually. But here's hoping, fingers crossed.
Oh, yeah. No, a very interesting time for the industry. But it's funny, when I was watching Survivor Series, I had it muted because the girlfriend was talking to me about something. I can't remember what. But, the main event had happened.
Right.
And I'm talking to her. I'm looking over here, and it's muted, so I can't see what's happening on the TV. And I just look over, and I'm like, is that CM Punk? Because I didn't hear his music, or I didn't hear him on the mic. I didn't know until like minutes after he showed up. So I look over and I'm like, girlfriend, do you know who that is? And she's like, absolutely not. I'm like, well, he's kind of a big deal,
right? And
I missed it.
To end on this note, there's a great TikTok that's rolling around. I'll have to send it to you later. And you know how they make like really shitty like cutouts of video and they put it in front of like something else or whatever. Like it's real low grade. It's the shot of him walking like, looking in the ring like, in his white t-shirt and shit. And the caption reads something like, what does it say? Your dad coming back 17 years after leaving the house for cigarettes when you've hit the lotto. So fucked. I'm like, or when you hit the Powerball or some shit like that. I was like, oh fuck.
That's really mean, but I'm sure he got paid.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, as for me, signing off. If you'd like to catch up on any of our other Catching Up on Cinema content, you can find all of that collected on our website at CatchingUpOnCinema.com. You can also find us on the social medias in the form of the Instagram at CatchingUpOnCinema, as well as the Twitter /X at Catching Cinema. So feel free to hit me up at either of those. And the podcast is available on pretty much every platform you can imagine, including Bitcade. So fucking Google it. That being said, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.